Well, it's the moment of truth. And I didn't think that I would be shook. But right now, I am shooketh, bitch. Today, I'm going to be sharing something very close to home and very close to my heart with all of you. I want to tell my story about my experience with childhood abuse. Before I get into the story, I want to make it very clear that this video is not to start drama. This video is not about slander or trying to hurt someone or be facetious in any way. I decided to do this video because for so long, I've been silenced by family and even by my own self in regards to my experience with this. And that has only led to self-sabotage, destructive habits, and bitterness, as well as resentments. So I share this with all of you today as a means to hopefully help someone out there who may have experienced the same things as I have, and even to help those who may have experienced things a little bit differently than I have, by giving them a voice that they felt like they never had, and hopefully to encourage others to share their story, to set themselves free from their emotional and mental prison that they've allowed themselves to be in, or that they've been placed in by their own family. Now, I talk a lot about narcissism on this channel. And for me, I got a double whammy. I have a narcissistic mother and a narcissistic father. And by me sharing this story, this is me making peace with it. This is me standing up for myself the way that I never could when I was younger. So, let's get into it. Now, my trauma started at a very young age. My parents separated when I was 2, so of course I have no recollection of them being together. But according to both of them, they were in a volatile and extremely toxic and abusive relationship. And I remember at 3 years old, this is where my journey of trauma began. Now, I want to give you the perspective of my mother first, and my experience with her, and then we'll move into my experience with my father, since I stayed in both households at different times in my life. Now, at 3 years old, I absolutely loved scholarly things. I loved going to school. I loved to read. I loved to write. I used to play with my stuffed animals and pretend that I was the teacher and have my little journal and pretending to write them up and creating curriculums and, nerdy stuff like that. And I remember when I was reading books, I still love to read, but when I was reading books, it was like my own little escape during this time. And it was an escape from the toxicity and the lack of nurturing and love that I experienced with my mother. Now, mind you, everything wasn't all bad with the situation. My mom and I have always had an interesting relationship when it came to us joking around, being goofy together, and just overall, acting silly. That was the way that we bonded. But the disconnect between me and my mother was emotional, or the lack thereof. I remember at the age of 3, my mother was with a different man at the time. And I didn't really get to see much of her as it was because she was always at work. And when she wasn't at work, she was spending time with her boyfriend at the time. Now, mind you, I wasn't demanding as a child. If anything, I just wanted basic love, attention, nurturing. But that was something my mother couldn't really give. Now that I'm older, I understand that she was just emulating what she may have seen in her childhood. But as a child, I didn't understand that. And there was an incident that I'll never forget. My way of expressing myself, since my mother always taught me that emotions were weakness, I expressed myself in other ways. So whether this was acting out in school or doing things like taking my crayons and coloring all over the wall. And I remember my mom saw this. And she was very upset, obviously. And I was made to have to clean it up with a washcloth. And she went back to the room and proceeded to continue to spend time with her boyfriend. Now, mind you, this set the tone for our dynamic for our entire relationship. She had a tendency of putting other people before me. And I was made to feel as though I was unworthy of attention or affection, and that I was burdensome to her whenever I tried to get that from her. So I used my books and writing and all the little, gaming games that I had. Because one thing about my parents was they always provided me with all of the best things a kid could ever dream of having. But the one thing I wanted so desperately was something that I never got and they couldn't give. Now, I remember telling my mother that the man that she was with had touched me. Because my mother had always taught me, if anybody touched you here, that's not okay. The weird thing is she had always given me a lot of tools in my life to learn from. But she just wasn't a nurturer. She wasn't very huggy or just there was no affection from her. But I saw her give it to everyone else other people's kids. And it always made me feel like something was wrong with me. But I didn't know how to express that with words at that age. And after I told her that the man she was with had touched me, she asked him, and of course he denied it. And she believed him. And they stayed together until he stepped out of the relationship. And that was that. But before all that, there was another incident where my father and this man that she was with had an altercation. And at this time, I was 4 years old. And my dad was supposed to pick me up so I could spend the weekend with him. But unfortunately, I think that me telling her that I was touched, and I think she told my father, I honestly still to this day don't know what that was about, but just from the situation at hand, that's the only thing I could think of that would make my father so angry. Because what I saw was my mother in between her boyfriend at the time and my father. And my father had a gun. I was sitting alone in the passenger seat of my mom's car, watching the whole time. And they're yelling back and forth. And my dad has the gun out and my mom's in between both of them, trying to get them to stop. And I'm just by myself crying, confused, alone. And that alone was the straw that broke the camel's back. Of course, my parents had shared custody, and they didn't do this legally at the time. So there was a lot of manipulative behavior between the two of them, my mother and my father. And my mother would tell me all these horrible things about my father and the things that he did, the horrible things that he said. My dad's telling me horrible things about my mom, the horrible things she said, the horrible things she did. And this definitely wasn't the first, the last time that I was put into adult situations that I shouldn't have been put in. And I couldn't go to either side to talk about how I felt because, again, emotionally they just weren't there. Now, when I was younger, things weren't as bad. Although they were pretty bad, they weren't as bad as when I got older. And fast forward to the age of 6 to 7. I'm still living with my mom. And at this time, she was single. And again, as a kid, you don't understand that going to work and having to pay all your bills by yourself and having the responsibilities of taking care of a kid on top of it all, and I wasn't the easiest kid to raise. I mean, I didn't do anything horrible, but I would get in trouble here and there at school from either talking too much or, just being distracted in class. My grades were good because I loved school, so that wasn't the issue. But just the acting out part was becoming a problem. And I take full responsibility for that. But I also realized that that was, again, my way of expressing myself because I wasn't able to talk to either one of my parents about what was going on, nor did I even know how to articulate how I felt as a child. So around this time, my mother was extremely frustrated. Again, she wasn't really attentive like that. And even though I had all of the coolest gadgets and toys and games, I still felt like something was missing. And around this time, memories of being around the babysitter at the time that my mom had for me and what was going on in that household was also taking its toll on me. I was being molested there as well. And because of me telling her before about her boyfriend and what had happened and how that turned out, I stayed silent about what was going on. And so after a while, all of the internalization that was going on really started to make me angry, sad, confused, and I just felt alone. There were times where my dad was supposed to pick me up around this time as well. I remember he was supposed to pick me up on Wednesdays from the YMCA. And my father at the time was an alcoholic. It was so bad that whenever he did finally show up to pick me up, there were beer cans littered throughout the entire car. And again, I didn't know how to say, hey Dad, it really hurts when you tell me you'll be here this day, or I'm waiting for you all night, or, until 9 p.m. at the YMCA for you to show up, just to be disappointed over and over. So I internalized that. And again, my greatest escape was not only reading at this time, but school as well. I still love to learn. I don't care what it is. I just love to learn. I get bored easily. So I love to learn. And one thing that I was good at, one thing that I felt like I could do well, was academics. And there were a few times throughout school, matter of fact, there were 2 times that I was offered to skip a grade. So I could have been 2 years ahead of the game. And mind you, I was dealing with bullying all throughout school until about sophomore year. So that didn't really change, but everyone in my family knew I loved school. And that was the one thing I looked forward to. And when my mother didn't allow me to take that opportunity, when I found out later on in life, it really pissed me off. And the excuse that I was given was that I was already getting bullied, so it would have gotten worse. But with that logic, that doesn't make sense anyway. I was getting bullied anyway, so it wouldn't have made a difference, A. And B, I would have gotten out of school two years earlier. So to me, honestly, I felt like my mom screwed me over with that one. She was concerned about me growing up too fast, but yet they put me in adult situations. So a lot of contradictory things here. Now, let's fast forward to about 9 years old, and she finds someone else to be with. And I did not like this guy at all. I don't know what it was. I didn't realize I was an empath at the time, but I didn't like him. And I tried to talk to my mom about how I felt without being disrespectful or rude, and I never said anything in front of him about how I felt, so as to not cause problems. But my mother would always tell me that she deserves a life too, and all of these different things, which in retrospect, I completely agree. All parents should be able to have a life as well. But I think the one thing that she never learned, even from her own mother and just in general about being a mother, is that when you have kids, it's not about you anymore. You have to put the kid first. Period. There was always this distance between me and her for some reason. It's like we could joke around and goof around, but when it came to my feelings, she obviously didn't give a damn. And around this time, this is when the physical abuse started. And there were times where when I would get in trouble in school, a lot of people would say, oh, this is old school, but I'm sorry, this is abuse, what I'm about to say. There were times where I'd get written up for talking in class. I never did anything violent. I never did anything big, to where it was just a huge ordeal. And I remember I got suspended a few times just for my behavior and just acting out. Being bullied, stuff like that, acting out due to that. Being bullied at home, acting out about that. And again, my grades were good, but there were just little things that I would do as a kid. And there was one time I remember where she put a tray of rice on the ground. And she put 2 heavy textbooks in both of my hands and had me hold them up like this for, an extended period of time, for however long she said. And my knees, I had to kneel into the rice. And whenever I would lower the books, I would get switched or, whipped with the belt. And I had welts. I had bruises. Went to school this way. CPS was called many different times throughout my time in school. And I remembered I did something. I had gone through the trash or did something, overate something or could. There was something that I did as a kid that just kids do. And there was always an extreme reaction to these things. I remember there was another time when I was on punishment and I'd went outside when I was told not to. Of course, that wasn't the right thing to do, and I take responsibility for that, but I saw my mom coming home and I tried to rush to the house before she got to the door, but we basically met at the door, and from there she took a broom and proceeded to beat me with the broom. And I still have a scar on the right side of my head from this. When she hit me and the broom broke and drew blood. There were also some other times where similar incidents happened, and I just remember my mom always saying things like, I brought you in this world, I can take you out. There were times where she would choke me, beat my head against the carpet. There were a few times where I had to go stay with my grandparents, or one of her friends' house, and it was because of what had happened, and I'm sure she felt bad about it, but these types of things just continue to happen. And at this time, there was a time where I had written in my journal that I wanted to harm myself and to leave the planet, basically. And I wrote this in my diary. That was the only outlet that I had had. And I remember my mom reading my diary on the phone with another family member, and she was just blatantly laughing about it, claiming that I just wanted attention, when that diary that I had a lock, and it was locked, and she broke through it. And if I really wanted attention, I think I would have told everybody rather than writing it in a diary that was locked. There were also times where I would hear my mother being intimate with the men that she was with, and it just made me sick and disgusted and uncomfortable. And some people might say, oh, that's normal, I heard my parents doing that, or I saw my parents doing that, but I'm sorry, I don't think that's okay. It's not okay. And this carried on for a while until my mom just got fed up. And this happened frequently whenever she just couldn't handle me anymore, or so she would say. She would either send me to my grandparents or my dad if he was coherent enough to come through and pick me up and stick to his word about doing so. And there was one time where, at this time, the age of 9 was the youngest age where you could fly on a plane by yourself. And my mom impulsively packed my things, didn't tell anybody that I was going on a plane back to Houston, and I got to the airport, and I remember that I had my papa's number memorized, and I called him and told him what happened, and he was shocked and said that he didn't even know that I was coming. And so at this time, I ended up going to stay with my dad. And that situation wasn't all that better. He was extremely strict. And although he put me in the best schools, I could tell that he meant well when it came to my academics and just what he had to go through with lack of education and things like that. He knew the importance of that, and that was really drilled into me, which is a good thing to teach your child. But again, from an emotional standpoint, there was that detachment there as well with him. And whichever parent I was staying with at the time, they didn't want me talking to the other. And with my mother especially, if I called my dad and she found out about it, by hitting redial or whatever whenever she got home, I would get in trouble for that. And the same would go for my dad. He would react the same way, and I was told all of this stuff about how my dad had another kid that he gave up rights to, and all this other stuff that my mom was telling me. And I remember asking my dad about it, and he lied about it and told me no. And so I dealt with a lot of lies with him, and it kind of just made me not trust men especially. He would always tell me all these things that we were going to go and do together, and we'd never do it. I was never able to go outside to play with other kids. I was like a prisoner. And the one good thing I remember about my dad is that we would drive down to Orange and go see some family, but most of the time I would just get left at my grandma's house and watch some Disney movies until he was done doing whatever he was doing with my uncles. And that's how it was every time we went. And I saw my dad doing a lot of questionable stuff at this time, talking to other women while he was with my stepmom. They'd been together for a very long time, since I was 3. And I watched that man try to talk to just about every woman that he thought was attractive. He would tell me all the time, don't trust boys, this is how they think, because that's how he thinks. He was equally verbally abusive, controlling. They both were liars. Still are. And that was my example of a male role model. Then something happened around 9 or 10. And my dad took me to my uncle's house, and some of my cousins were there. And at the time, we were playing outside in the front yard, and my dad was over talking to some female. And something happened that really, really screwed me up. And I had no one to talk to about this. When I was in the front yard, I remember there was an SUV driving way too fast through the neighborhood, and there was a speed bump that it went over. And I just remember the SUV, and then it tried to turn the corner when it was on the left 2 wheels, and it obviously crashed, and the wreckage looked like damn near close to a crushed soda can. damn near. And so I'm watching all of this, and my dad, of course, runs, and he helped this girl that was still in the SUV while the driver and the other person that was with them left her there. And I just remember seeing this heaving, blood-covered person. And my dad's hovering over her, trying to help her, and he tells me to go inside. And I was pretty screwed up from that and had nightmares about that for about a good year or two. And I didn't talk to my dad about it. We never talked about it again. And so I did a lot of moving around between mom and dad. My mom ended up coming back after about a year after that, and she came with my grandfather. And mind you, my papa has always been the one that showed me love. He told me I was a leader. He said that I have talents, don't squander it, don't waste it. He always told me I was beautiful. He always told me that, I was meant for great things and that I needed to apply myself. And, he was always in my corner, and always, whenever my parents couldn't really get the things I needed, he would be there. My grandfather was my mom and my dad when it came to nurturing. And I didn't really see him all that often. And so I've always held my grandfather in high esteem. And I was really angry and have been angry with my parents for a long time for some of these things. They would always say that I was manipulative. I wanted attention. Every time I tried to express how I felt to them about the things that they would do, whenever I would get hit, they would tell me that, well, it's because you did this, it's because you did that. Granted, I did do things to get in trouble, but they were always telling me they were the parent, I was the child. And so I never had a voice, and they never wanted to hear what I had to say. And every time I tried to express myself, they would say I was being disrespectful when I was really just trying to tell them how I felt. Fast forward to about 13 or so, going into freshman year. And my dad wanted me in all AP classes. And I mean, granted, I was capable of doing the work, and, I qualified for those classes, but honestly, it was just a bit much just starting high school. And I felt a lot of pressure to perform, and I didn't really feel like I was ever good enough. No matter what I did, it just wasn't enough for my dad. That's how I felt. That's how it was. There were times where I, during my choir recitals, they would go, but there wasn't any recognition for my gifts or abilities, and just, again, there's a huge detachment there. I remember one time I sang a song that we were going to sing in a concert for choir, in front of my dad in the living room practicing. And I remember he just looked disinterested, unimpressed, and was bringing up Christina Aguilera and Mariah Carey and saying that, that I didn't sound like that. And just, it was really just extremely hurtful. There was one time with my dad as well where he got a phone call about me skipping class. And mind you, again, I love school. School's never been the problem. If anything, I didn't need to be micromanaged, but he micromanaged me all the time, wanting to check my homework. If it wasn't up to his standards, then I'd have to stay up all night and do it. I mean, even with the dishes, if I didn't take care of that before school or whatever, I would have to stay up all night and take care of it. Sometimes he would wake me up in the middle of the night screaming and and I'm not gonna lie, I've told a lot of lies, because I felt like I had to. I didn't really feel like I could be myself around my parents, and so, when he got that call about me skipping class, which I didn't, he didn't believe me. And at this time, I was a little bit older now. I'm 16. And I'm just fed up with both of my parents at this point. Especially after there was a time where he found my diary and found that I still had those same suicidal thoughts, and he decided to bring down that same gun that he waved in front of my mom's ex all those years ago and loaded it from what it looked like to me. I mean, he probably didn't, but I thought that it was loaded, and he put it in front of me and was like, if you want to do it, do it. And I'm thinking, wow, charming. Thanks, Dad. I really appreciate that lack of empathy. Again, if I wanted attention, I would have just been screaming at the rooftops telling everybody how I felt. But again, it's in a diary that it wasn't meant for other eyes. And so, again, I was fed up, and he didn't believe me about not skipping class. And at this time, there was a substitute. And I guess he didn't input it in the computer and only wrote down who was there. And it was a PE class, so it really was stupid for me to have skipped PE but nothing else. So anyways, so my dad got so mad when I didn't say that I did skip, because I didn't skip. And I kept saying I didn't skip, and he proceeded to punch me in my face. And I said I didn't skip 6 or 7 times because I was not going to admit to something I didn't do. And I felt like I was standing up for myself at that point. Granted, maybe I could have handled it a little bit better, but so could he. And he punched me in the face, and I had a golf ball-sized black eye that I was trying to cover up with my hair. I was looking like the chick from The Ring, still trying to protect my father. But the counselors pulled me out from the hallway and was like, dude, we can't let you walk around like this and not report this. Like, we need to know what happened, and we need to know it now. And I tried to hide it, but eventually I had to tell them what happened. And my dad showed up, and they told him that I didn't skip and that I was telling the truth. And he didn't even apologize. So at this point, this is where I decided to run away. Again, I felt like a prisoner. I mean, and granted, they found marijuana at one point in time. They didn't find the marijuana, but they found a foil pipe in the closet. And granted, I'm not saying that this is okay to do at this age, but at the time, that's what I used to ease my mind and again to escape. And I was hanging out with a crowd that was smoking, and he found it in the bathroom closet and flipped shit, and I started getting strip searched. And there was a time where my dad would just berate me with just horrible things to say to a kid. Calling me stupid, saying that I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I was ungrateful. manipulative, sneaky. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. I was either going to end up dead or in prison. I was never going to amount to anything. And I was just done. I watched my parents lie to the authorities. I watched my parents lie to lawyers. I was in between a bitter custody battle between them, and they both were asking me who I wanted to be with, and this was way too much pressure to put on me. And my dad was telling me my mom just wanted to claim taxes on me, and my mom was saying the same thing about my dad, and so I just felt like a paycheck to both of them. I didn't really feel like, again, that I mattered. I mean, there's a huge emotional disconnect. There's a lot of mental abuse, emotional abuse, And at this point, I just started running away from home, and I ran away about 7 or 8 times. I just knew I had to get out of that household. I wasn't myself anymore. I was always angry. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I hated myself. I used to get made fun of by my mom and my dad about my stomach, my pooch, and how I was tomboyish, and just all this silly stuff that they didn't need to say. It was just bullying. Period. And when I ran away that final time, there was a time just before where my dad was like, look, if you run away again, I'm not ever going to talk to you again. And that was music to my ears at that point in time and at that age, I thought I had everything figured out. I thought that I'd be fine on the streets, and I had someone that I could go stay with, and so I risked it all and I left. And ever since then, my dad stayed true to that word. He couldn't stay true to everything else that he said, but he stayed true to that. And then he wouldn't talk to me anymore. And I remember at this time, 16, 17, I started falling into alcohol more so, and harder drugs, and going out, and just running from myself. And I remember there were a couple times where I was drunk and I tried to reach out and call my dad and leave voicemails, call my mom, leave voicemails. They wouldn't talk to me, and I would write letters to my dad for at least 2 years straight, and he would ignore them until there was a point in time where I caught him at his office, and I heard his phone ringing when I called when I was at the door, and he really tried to ignore me until I texted him and said, I just heard your phone ring. Please open the door. And when he opened the office door, this had been about 2 years after I'd already ran away, and he was just trying to act like he was the victim and didn't even ask if I was okay, didn't ask where I was staying. I could tell it was just pride. He just can't put it aside. And then later on in life, I started recalling certain memories, and I told my mother, and this was about somewhere in my 20s, 21, 22, and I told my mom that I started recalling some other memories about being touched when I was younger, and my mom admitted to me that I told her my dad touched me, and she asked my dad, and he freaked out and was like, I was just bathing her. And my mom was like, well, she knew how to bathe herself at that age, and, that doesn't make sense. But again, what I had to say held no weight, and so she believed him. And now, around this age, there was, just to wrap this all up, I know this is depressing as hell. I'm sorry, y'all, but this needs to get out. Because once I finish this story, I will never talk about this again. And I will finally be able to set myself free and forgive myself and forgive them. But there was a time where, I lost my child, and took me a long time to come to terms with that. And I found out from other family members that my parents were judging me for that. My dad lied to my mother about him supposedly having a stroke, and I stepped over him. That's complete fabrication. And he knows that that's a complete fabrication. I found out from other family members that they've been smearing my name. They're not even concerned about whether I'm alive or dead or not, but they sure have a lot to say behind my back. But then when I reach out to them, they pretend everything's all good and they don't know what's going on. And when my grandfather passed away, that was my whole world. And when I got the news, come to find out my mom had been in Houston the whole time. She didn't even call me, didn't even text me, didn't even Facebook message me, nothing. But I had to find out from my uncles. And they told me I need to come down there and visit. And so, mind you, I was really going through my own downward spiral of drugs. And my grandfather and I had talked, thank God, before that. And I told him everything that happened. And I told him that's why I'm kind of spiraling, And he understood. And he was always looking out for me and telling the people I was staying with to take care of me. And he was always there. And I remember when I was on the way to go see him in the hospital after he'd had a heart attack. And I was told that nobody wanted me there, and because it would have caused a lot of stress, that I should not make it about me and I should stay where I was at. Sorry. And so when I was told that, I just turned around and I called. And at this time, he had come out of the coma that he went in, and I just remember I called and the doctor said that they put the phone up to his ear, and I told him, because he had seen me during my addiction with speed, and I told him that, I was working 2 jobs, I found a place to stay, and that I was okay, and that I was doing good. And that was the last time that I got to talk to him. I couldn't even see him. And to this day, my mom has always had a reason for it. My grandmother had to make the decision. That was her husband. It was a stressful time and all this other stuff. But I'm thinking, fuck their feelings. What about me? That was my grandfather. And they brought up how, my beliefs and how I wasn't a Christian. And they brought up how I was going through my phase with addiction and all this other stuff. And just all this stuff that didn't matter. And the fact my mom didn't even tell me about any of this, and then she waited until my grandfather was literally passing away to tell me to come up there, and unfortunately I couldn't get up there. That right there, I didn't think I could ever forgive that, but I know if Papa was here, he would want me to forgive her. But I will never forget that. There was a time where me and my mom had gotten in a fight years later. She's always fighting with me and yelling at me about something stupid, and I just remember her blaming me for Papa's passing. Talking about how I used him and all this stuff, and I never used my grandfather. And I told her outright, I said, Papa knows what you did. You may think that we weren't talking, but you're telling me he didn't want to see me. I know it's a lie. Papa was always looking out for me. We had been talking and nobody knew. So I knew she was lying. Then later on, I found out my mama passed away on my dad's side. And he didn't tell me. And my dad had the nerve, when I asked him, I said, why didn't you tell me? Why do I have to find out from my cousins? And he's like, well, did you go to your papa's funeral? First of all, that's none of your business. Second of all, you don't know what happened. Third of all, that doesn't answer my question. And they've just been talking crap about me amongst each other because they're my parents, right? They'll talk to each other, but they won't talk to me. As much as they talked crap about each other in the past and lied on each other about this or whatever the hell. But they can't talk to me. But yet they're talking to each other because they care about me and I'm their daughter. Yeah, okay. I found out that my mother was talking about how I dated a white person and how she was upset about that and talking about me losing my child to all these other family members and that finally coming out. This is not how parents are supposed to act. And I don't give a damn if there's anybody that comes in the comment section trying to tell me anything about this, about how I'm wrong for feeling the way I do. Well, then you're a narcissist just like the rest of them. But this is why I needed to talk about this today. Because I finally decided earlier this year to finally speak my mind and to walk away myself. I finally told them both, I'm not chasing y'all anymore. I've been doing this for years. I've been trying to establish a relationship with both of you. Neither of you have initiated conversation. Neither of you. Neither of you have looked out for me the same way that Papa has. Neither of you have been concerned about my well-being. Neither of you have been parents at all. And you're both wrong. If you both are watching this video right now, you're both wrong for the things that you did. And I have every right to be angry at you. I have every right to be hurt, and I have every right to speak out about how I feel, whether you like it or not. But I'm so tired of being silenced. And this is why I did this video. I deserve to be loved. And I don't deserve any of the things that have been said behind my back. So if you both are watching, I hope that you both can grow up enough to step outside of yourselves and actually show some empathy. But I don't think you both are capable of that. I genuinely don't. Because if you haven't done it then, I know you're not going to do it now. And even if you did it now, I don't want you in my lives anymore. I'm done. I'm done. So today I've decided to do this video to get this out. Because I've been holding this in for so long and you've kept me silent for so long that I was scared to do this video. I was scared to speak out. But you know what? I'm not afraid of you anymore. You both are abusers. You need to be called out for what you've done. Staying silent in the face of evil is worse than the evildoer themselves. So I'm done. The truth is out now. And the reason why I wanted the truth to come out is so I can release it. So I can forgive you. So I can stand up for myself the way that I never could before growing up. I think it's sad and a shame that you two lost out on a good, beautiful person such as myself for your own ego, pride, and selfishness. So this is my story. And I hope that this gives a voice to those of you that never felt like you could use your voice. I hope that this video allows you guys to heal through this story with your own situation. I hope this gives you guys the courage to stand up to your abusers and to forgive yourself for staying silent as long as you have, and to forgive those who have abused you and wronged you. so you can set yourself free. So you can find love in your life. So you can stop the vicious cycle of codependency and narcissism and toxic relationships. I know one thing. Internalization is a bitch. And it causes depression, it causes addiction, it causes self-sabotage, it causes you to hate yourself. But when you stand up and you use your voice, and you stand up for yourself, you stand up for what's right, regardless of whether people are standing next to you or not, that is what gives you strength to find forgiveness in your heart so you can move on and be free. So please, if you guys feel compelled to share your story, please leave comments below. That way we all know that we're not alone. For those of you who may have gone through this or are going through this, even if it's a domestic abuse situation, speak up and set yourself free. Love yourself the way that they couldn't love you. And focus on the love that you did and do have in your life. One thing I can say is Papa was my saving grace. And I don't know where the hell I'd be without him. May he rest in peace. I thank God every day that I was able to have that man in my life. And even with the toxicity that I've come out of, let this be a testament to all of you that you can overcome as long as you stand up and speak up. Thank you for listening.